Government corruption has never been more prevalent or caused more harm. It's why extremism is on the rise. It's why the financial gap between the haves and have-nots has never been wider. And it's why our planet is at risk of an extinction level tragedy. That's why I need your help to keep exposing the truth about the rot on both sides of the aisle. Become a supporter or a friend of the show today by clicking on the coffee link in the description box below. Friends of the show join me on a Zoom hangout once a month, and you guys can ask me any questions you want, and I can get to know you better. But the most important reason to help is to keep the show alive. Together, we can and will save our country and our planet. Thanks in advance and enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome to Plants and Politics. I have an update to share about one of Trump's Capitol insurrectionists. It's time for an episode of Where Are They Now?
Matthew Bledsoe was arrested.
Patrick Montgomery was in court.
Jonathan Manapa will stay in federal custody.
No, I don't take responsibility at all.
So 23-year-old Maryland resident Matthew Miller was seen on video. He took part in the most egregious violence on January 6th in the Lower West Terrace Tunnel. That was where we saw Mr. Miller on video spraying police officers with a fire extinguisher. He was also part of that large mob of Trump's terrorists that were pushing. They were taking part in that heave-ho effort against officers in the tunnel. You might have seen that video by now where the terrorists were in a concerted effort, yelling heave ho and rocking back and forth, trying to break the police line. And, the officers were literally crushed. Some of them were literally crushed. They were beaten with all kinds of objects, sprayed with all kinds of substances. They were tasered. And Miller not only took part in the violence, but he also helped to incite it because he was seen on video waving for others to advance toward the tunnel. And he was heard yelling, "Come on." And Miller was seen wearing a Confederate flag as a cape that day. So that tells you everything you need to know about him. So Miller was arrested on January 25th of last year. He was charged with a multitude of crimes in a superseding indictment. He was hit with civil disorder, obstructing an official proceeding, assaulting officers with a dangerous weapon, entering a restricted building or grounds with a deadly or dangerous weapon, disorderly conduct in a restricted building or grounds with a deadly or dangerous weapon, physical violence in a restricted building or grounds with a deadly or dangerous weapon, disorderly conduct on Capitol grounds, physical violence on Capitol grounds, and then climbing or injuring property on Capitol grounds. In February of this year, Miller pleaded guilty to 2 felonies, which were obstructing an official proceeding and assaulting officers. Now, because he accepted the plea, the prosecutor dropped all of the other charges, and they also dropped the dangerous weapon enhancement on the assault charge. So Miller was looking at between 41 and 51 months in prison. That's based on federal sentencing guidelines. And for once, the prosecutor actually requested the upper end. They wanted 51 months behind bars and then followed by 3 years of probation. Miller's attorney, however, asked the judge to sentence him to only 1 year and 1 day. And he argued that Miller only went there to be part of history. And then he actually used intoxication as a defense. He told the judge that Miller had about 10 beers, some sort of unidentified alcohol that was being passed around among the rioters, and then also weed. So this was all while he was at the Capitol assaulting officers. And I guess this is supposed to make it better. He argued also that Miller shouldn't be held accountable because he was only 21 at the time, and the human prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed until 25. So his impulse control and decision-making were altered. Not that I disagree with the science, right? He's correct about the brain, but perhaps we should reconsider a few things, like when you're able to purchase a weapon, when you're able to purchase alcohol, and how old you have to be to enlist in the military. Anyway, I digress. So Miller's attorney also wrote in a pre-sentencing memo, quote, Matthew is a young man who made a terrible decision on January 6, 2021. He recognizes that his personal conduct and participation in the riot were not born of a rational decision, but rather were fueled by alcohol and marijuana abuse. He fully accepts responsibility for what he has done and is not making excuses. I mean, sure sounds like excuses to me. And I don't have anything against marijuana and alcohol, but how about if you're going to get drunk and high, you just sit your ass at home? How about that? Cash me outside. How about that? Anyway, U.S. District Judge Randolph Moss presided over Miller's case, and he questioned his so-called remorse. And he said that he appeared to be, quote, coaching and coordinating the other people who were there on January 6th. His attorney, however, told the judge, I guess you would describe him as a cheerleader, Your Honor, not coaching, but cheerleading. So the prosecutor pointed out, quote, cheerleaders don't go on the field. They stay on the sidelines. Mr. Miller very much went on the field. Miller also spoke at the hearing. He told the judge that he was, quote, ashamed of my shortcomings and naivete. He also called himself weak and terribly misguided. And he told Judge Moss, quote, seeing pictures of my inebriated behaviors that day sends shivers down my spine. My intentions that day were to wear a wild outfit, drink some beers, and have a great time. I never thought things would go the way they did. So Judge Moss told him, quote, I don't think there were any attacks on the officers at the Capitol as dangerous as those in the tunnel. And then he went on to say, quote, Mr. Miller, in firing the extinguisher, didn't attack a single officer, but attacked all the officers that were in there. But then he had a troubling back and forth with the prosecutor, which basically signaled his intentions to go easy on him. Judge Moss told the prosecutor, quote, we are dealing with someone here who is younger than most, perhaps more impressionable, more prone to get carried away by rhetoric, false statements, the emotions of the crowd who was around him, and too many cans of beer beforehand. It's not grounds for a departure and not an excuse, but I do wonder in my mind how I compare a drunk 22-year-old to some of these other folks who were stone sober in their 40s, who knew perhaps a lot better than Mr. Miller did, and were perhaps less impressionable, less likely to be moved by a crowd, less likely to be moved by the inflammatory and false rhetoric of the President of the United States. The prosecutor still tried to, maintain their position that Miller was not a follower. He was an inciter. He was an agitator. But it seems that his age did play a factor into Judge Moss's decision, because he sentenced him to only 33 months in prison, 2 years of probation, and 100 hours of community service. And then he ordered Miller to pay a $2,000 restitution fee. So cases like this are exactly why I say that the QAnon shaman and a few other people, Paul, I forget his name, in my mind, they received excessive sentences. If Jacob Chansley and some of these other people deserved 41 months or more, then this guy deserves every bit of 51 months. He assaulted officers with a dangerous chemical weapon, and he gets less than 3 years. This is total bullshit. And I don't want to hear about his age. If he's a big enough boy to travel all by his lonesome to DC, and he's big enough to drink alcohol and smoke weed and then attack full-grown officers, then he can have a big boy sentence. Anyway, and I'll have to do the math, but I believe at least he will be locked up during the next election. So that's one small silver lining, but this is not enough. So I will let you guys know when and if I hear more about Mr. Miller. Thanks so much for watching and listening. Take care. I'll talk with you soon.